out there and unlock the middle end. Chris Starcheski, co-host with Josh Tovar. We've got a great episode of Navigating Leadership number 96 coming at you here on this balmy February evening. We've got Bobby Pollicino, impacts on the educational world, to be able to talk with us tonight. We'll be hearing a little bit about him. Josh, how you been, my friend? It's been a while since I've been on screen with you.
I know it's great over here now that finally Texas thawed out. We saw a little bit of ice, so we had to close everything down. And don't make fun of us because we don't got the machines like you guys over there in the New England region. We don't got all that salt. So you know what? A little bit of ice, we close everything down. I'm scared. Hey, Josh Tovar, proud principal of Memorial Pathway Academy and Garland ISD, Garland, USA, welcoming everybody. And you know what? That guy over there, Grizzly Adams, he forgot to play the song. He's out of practice. You know, and it's all right. No, we just got to make sure he gets back on the roll on the whole rotation of being part of Unlock the Middle. But hey, we're ready to grow together because we have an awesome guest, right? This guy right here in the middle, he joined us during the red zone. He was there, but now it's about to dive deep into what he brings to the table. And let me tell you all, he has a fabulous book, but you know what? I'm not the author. I read it, and it's a fabulous read. But you know what? What do you think about that, Chris?
I'm really excited tonight, Josh. And, Bobby, as a head of school at the Bullis School in Potomac, Maryland, you've got some great experience. You're a former high school teacher. You're an athletics coach. You've got a great background for how to take people from the level they are to move them to the next. And, 15 years of experience in the role as a school administrator provides a lot of that street cred that we really want to hear from as we start to get into this. Your book, Principled Leader, which is available out there on Amazon, really focuses on principles of leadership, related to relationships, leadership and fitness, the mental, physical, and spiritual kind of fitness, not just the physical. And, you talk a little bit about leadership strategies for decision making, which kind of incorporates that holistic approach. As we come into this conversation tonight, Bobby, if you could share your background, what your origin was in education, and take us from where you started to where you're at now.
Sure. Well, Josh and Chris, thanks so much for having me back. I'm glad that the red zone was good enough for you guys to bring me back. So I appreciate that. I'm originally from upstate New York, middle-class family growing up, had one older brother. Did not have any plans to get into education. Was a high school student athlete, college student athlete. When I graduated, I'd taken a job that summer. I was going to coach lacrosse at the University of Delaware, and then got a phone call from the older brother of a teammate, an opportunity to join a boarding school. They had a late departure in August and decided to, why not? Let's give it a try, see what happens. The head men's lacrosse coach at the time at Delaware said, go find out if you want to coach lacrosse in high school or college. Spend a year, and if you don't like it, I'll keep the job for you, which I'm incredibly indebted to Bob Schillinglaw for doing that, telling me that, because here I am nearly 25 years later, still in high school education. So grateful for that. Just really fell in love with working with kids, both in the classroom and on the field, on the courts, and then had an opportunity to get to Bullis, where I've been since 2003. Served as a science teacher, soccer and lacrosse coach, became the dean of students, assistant principal, and then, as you said, the head of the upper school now. And that's been a 9-year journey in that current role. And I've learned a lot in that time. Obviously, our learning was accelerated the last 4 years with COVID and everything. But just excited to share sort of what I've learned, and ultimately want to just help people that either are aspiring to be leaders or are currently leaders and looking for ways to grow. And that's what I hope my book and conversations does for folks.
So
Awesome.
Bobby,
Thank you.
So Bobby, where does this journey that began in different parts? I know your origins was in education. Where did it come from? Where was the origins? What's the genesis to creating this book for all educators out there?
Yeah, so I appreciate that question. For me, I really wasn't sure what this new position was going to hold 9 years ago when I became this sort of essentially principal, head of the upper school at Bullis, 575 kids and about 80 faculty members. And we were sitting at a meeting and my supervisor asked if I had my finger on the pulse of the faculty. And I said no. I don't. And I said, not because I don't care, not because I don't want to, but I just don't think about it. And I go back to my upbringing. I mentioned that middle class family in upstate New York. My dad was a retired Marine, combat veteran in Vietnam. Uh, my brother and I weren't really asked how we were feeling every day, right? You take out the trash because that's what's asked of you. And so that was great for me as a high school student athlete, as a college student athlete. I went out and did my best every day, regardless of how I felt. And I carried that into my role as a teacher, as an educator, as a coach. And so I wasn't checking on the faculty because I didn't see that as my job. I felt like they should be taking care of themselves. And so that question really sort of hit me. And I had to stop and think about, okay, what is different about this job that I'm doing now? And what do I need to do? And that summer after that question in that first year, I read Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why. And that really got me to start thinking about, what am I doing now? Why am I in this role? I knew what I was doing as a varsity boys lacrosse coach. I knew what I was doing as a dean of students or as an environmental science teacher. I didn't stop to think about how my why had changed. And one of the things that I've seen happen, and I've been guilty of doing as well, is we promote people that do a really good job, but then we don't always coach them or guide them, right? The great social studies teacher that we make the department chair may need a lot more training than we think to be a good chair, or the really good coach that we make an athletic director. So they're a great leader of young men or young women on the court, on the field, but can they lead adults as the athletic director? And I wasn't getting some of that coaching. And so then I just started doing a lot more reading, a lot more listening to podcasts, a lot more research. And I started developing essentially a book of ideas for myself. I had created this Google Doc of all of these different ideas where I was writing down, here's what I need to do to get better. Had no plans to write a book, just wanted to be better at what I was doing. And then, fast forward to the pandemic and sort of here we are now.
The story to generating a book is quite challenging. I had the good fortune of writing a chapter for a book by Jamie Fowler White and Frederick White called "The Labyrinth of Leadership," and it was a tiny tidbit of information about what I had learned, throughout my journey. What did you learn about yourself in the process of writing your book, Bobby?
That's a great question. I appreciate that, Chris. Really, what I realized in writing this was what I said and what I was doing at school wasn't always translating at home. So there was this cognitive dissonance that I wasn't aware of. An example I would say is, as I mentioned, I was our varsity boys lacrosse coach and had young children, and even talking to my wife about how any other children had to be born in the summer or fall. Like, we can't have kids in the spring because I can't miss practice or a game, right? And what message is that to my spouse? And then even, my kids were young, and that did happen. I have an August baby and 2 October babies. But they're young, and I'd get up, I'd leave in the morning to go to school, do my job there. We'd have practice or a game or what have you. And, the kids were asleep when I left. I'd get home some nights, they're asleep already. I leave the next morning, they're asleep, and come back and maybe see them. So here I am living under the same roof as my children and going 24, 36, 48 hours without seeing them. But yet I'm talking to my lacrosse players, or I'm talking to our faculty about what it means to be family, about what it means to take care of each other. But I'm not living that. And so as I was working on this book, and even once I knew the published date, one of the things that was in the back of my mind was, who's going to bring this book into my office and say, hey, page 47 says you do this. When's the last time you did that? And that's a good thing, right? Be held accountable. And so that was one of the things I really learned about myself in going through this was there are things that I say I do or that I want to do that maybe I'm not doing as consistently as I think I am. And so having that time to reflect on that and say, okay, here's where I can be better. And here's what I say I want to do. So how am I going to do that? And that's been important for me. It gets to that question, sometimes of why do we say we know what we're supposed to do, but then we don't do it? that gap exists too much in our lives sometimes, and writing really brings the truth out in that.
You know, Bobby, when I read that, that was like a little self-reflection for myself. Prior to my current campus, I was at a big school and 2,500 kids. It's 6A school in Texas. Schools are big over here.
Yeah.
And to really do the job justice, based that we were a D minus school, I believe that I had to be all around. So it was a Monday through Sunday gig. It was
Mm-hmm.
for sure at least 14 hours going to every event possible to just mix with the community. But during, like, just like you said, I would tell everybody, kids, go home to your parents, love your family, do all that. Here I was raising all these other kids. I was supporting them, but my two, I was ignoring them. I said, I can't go to your shows. I can't go because I have a championship game. I can't do that. And so when the opportunity came here, you know, I'm like, okay, I gotta leave. No duty, no athletics, no testing. You know, I get to experience a brand new part of Texas with all the experiences. And so when I read that, it was like a big aha moment for myself, like saying, you know what? Here I was preaching all this, but I was doing totally the opposite. And it's a trap that when you sit in the chair, you fall into. So
Yeah.
I really enjoyed reading that in your book because it was a moment for me to say, you know what? I did the right choice. I did the right move for my family, for my kids. So
Yep.
why this book now? Why Bobby? Why did you decide to put it out there?
Yeah. So as I said, I started this, pretty early on in my role, just making this Google Doc. And then, as we were all home in the spring of 2020, um, I didn't change my routine. So quiet. I do have 3 kids. I have 2 dogs, and I don't want to work out at night when I get home. I just want to be done with my day. So I get up at 4:30 and do my morning routine. And I didn't stop that with the pandemic. So all of a sudden, now at 6 o'clock, when I'd be getting everybody up and going, everybody could stay in bed. We didn't have to drive into school. We didn't have anything to do until the day started at 8. So I took advantage of that time, and I started putting these ideas down into a book. And what we all have experienced working in schools and as school leaders is we've seen teachers leave, we've seen administrators leave, so we've seen these openings, these gaps in school leadership. And so as we have these new leaders coming in, we need to make sure we're providing them with the skills and with the knowledge to go into these opportunities and be successful. So we have to give them the tools. We have to give them the strategies so that they can find success. And there's going to be challenges. I mean, the greatest teacher for all of us is experience, right? And reflecting on that experience. But going in without any information really puts you in a difficult position. Right? I think it was General Mattis said because of all of the reading that he did, he never went into any challenge, any fight, anything without at least having some idea of what to expect because of his reading. Nothing's going to be perfect. Nothing's going to align perfectly. But my hope is someone who reads this book now knows they can leave this on their desk. They have a situation that comes up. They can just flip to anywhere in the book and then find something on there. And then that can help them be successful as they take on these new roles. I just think it's really important as our jobs have gotten increasingly more challenging the last 3 years that we're doing everything we can to support current leaders. And then also someone who's saying, I don't know that I want to be a leader right now, based on what I see people going through in these roles, we can say you can be. It's not this, unbelievable challenging job that only a few get to do. There's room for more folks. And here are some ways that you can be prepared for these opportunities.
Hey Bobby, can I build on that right now? What
Yeah.
you just stated. What about that individual that went through the hangover year? It's not the assistant principal, the department head has their certification in administration, and he sees the ripple effect, how assistant principals are dealing with this new type of discipline issues.
Yep.
How they're dealing with this level of fans at the bleachers and the stands. And they say, I ain't gonna stop that. They don't pay me enough to be up there. There are no gold handcuffs. So how would you encourage them? Because it does take a certain level of grit, certain level of ganas to sit in the chair.
Yeah.
So how would you encourage those people that have the actual paperwork, they have the credentials, but they're not willing to go into the next step because of what they see with this Twitter, with TikTok challenges, the fan, like I said, the cheerleading moms. Well, how can you encourage them to say it is worth it?
Yeah. I think you go back to, what I mentioned earlier about what is your why? Why did you get into education? What is your purpose? What do you see there? And, for many folks that have stayed through this, it's because they believe in the value of education. They believe in their role to positively impact others. And I think when you start to see that as you expand your influence, John Maxwell says leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. So when you recognize that and say, okay, if I can help more people lead, and then they can expand that out, so you use the example of the department chair, right? So they're impacting all of their members of their department who are, ideally then impacting all of the kids that they're teaching. Well, what if you are now impacting more people as an AP, right? Or as a principal, or you get to the superintendent level, whatever it may be, because you have this passion for education, you want to help others, and you talk about this ripple effect and say, how do we do that? And this is where you can do that. But I do think we have to be honest with them and say it is going to require a disciplined approach so that you don't find yourself burned out. What do you do now to stay disciplined in all of the different priorities that you have? And how do you go through that? And let's talk about what it would require. So, honest, transparent communication about what's required, while also acknowledging that they're bringing these skills already and we're just looking to expand them.
What does it look like? How do you grab that department chair? How do you get that lead teacher? How do you get that collaborative team leader? Do you bring them to shadow you? What does it look like?
I think it's a conversation, right? About sort of I see this skill set in you. I believe that you could do this. You could help our community, maybe even another community. I think that's the hardest part, right? Too many leaders don't want to build up a leader to leave. But then what you're left with is people not doing a great job at your school just because you don't want to make them better to have them leave. That's not what you should be aiming for. You should be aiming for growing leaders who hopefully are going to stay and help you where you are, but maybe they are going to go out. And then you've done your job as a leader. You've helped create that ripple effect, because ultimately we should all want kids to have better opportunities and better experiences. So back to your question there, Josh, you bring that person in and you just have that conversation and say, I see you doing this great work. What is it that drives you? What is it that helps you get out of bed every morning and come here and handle these challenges? And as you listen to them, you then look for opportunities to build on what they share and connect it to the work that you do and how they have that ability, and then talk about the opportunities to do a shadow day, like you said, to maybe go to a professional development opportunity, to maybe if you have colleagues at other schools where they could go and have conversations so that they can learn and see what it's about. But you have to listen in that conversation. I talk in the book about listening to understand, and that's so important. And hear what they're telling you so that you're aware, because you may say, you know what? It sounds like what you're telling me is going on at home and everything else. This might be a couple years down the road, but we're going to revisit this conversation when I think you're ready, and make sure that they're aware, because sometimes they don't think anybody notices. So just having that conversation sends the message that I believe in you, I see you, and I know you can do more here. And I'm looking forward to working with you in that area.
Yeah, Bobby, that was really important perspective right there. I think back to my time at, a previous school in 2011. We had just had our third child here. It was a large school, not like quite Texas large, Josh, but it was 1,000 kids, seventh and eighth grade. Pretty big, 500 kids per grade. 140 something staff members, and there were a lot of challenges that went with that third child. And my wife is also an educator. She's in an assistant principal role right now, trying to fight that fight that we're talking about here. But back in 2011, I said to myself, you know what? The reality is that I don't think I can do this job in this setting to the level that
Yep.
I am capable of doing it. I ended up moving on to another school, smaller setting, had a great time, absolute fantastic. And then an opportunity here in my hometown opened up, and I shifted over to where I'm at now at Dudley Middle School. Nice small 5th through 8th grade middle school, and the like. But what I try to do with my staff and faculty is really, support them and align the head and the heart. And, listen, if you want to go the administrative route, we'll get you there. If you really feel that you are best served in a larger school in an urban setting as opposed to where we're at, relatively rural, all right, yeah, it's going to be hard to lose you as a member of our team, but let's get you where you're going to satisfy your heart and your mind and provide great service to kids. And ultimately, we'll get somebody to come in and do the job well, because we build our own and we provide support and we take good care. When we sit down and look at the context of your book, Bobby, and think about those different qualities and areas, that capacities that we look at for educators and leaders, what would you categorize as one of the number one learning opportunities or key takeaways that anyone who picks up your book should really be attuned to and apply to their practice?
Sure. I would say two that come right to mind. And one, I mentioned already, that listening to understand. That's so important for us when we sit down and we ask questions that we don't already have an idea of what they're going to say. It's that we're listening to them so that we can hear what they have to say. So as you said, there, Chris, that you can then support them in what they need. And what they need today may be different than what they need tomorrow or what they needed a week ago from you. And so how do we do that? How do we go about that? And to me, part of that is the preparation that you give in those meetings. As a school leader, you look at your calendar, you say, I have all of these meetings, and you go through and there's a couple teachers or faculty members that ask to schedule meetings with you. And you're thinking, I got all these other things to do. But that 10, 15, 20 minutes that faculty member gets in your office may be so incredibly important to them. They've been thinking about this conversation they're going to have with you. They've been planning for it. You owe them your undivided attention. And the only way you do that is by listening to understand, not waiting to respond, not waiting for your turn, not thinking about the answer before they even finish their question, but just listening the whole time. And that is hard to do, but it's something that we have to do, and it takes practice. Like any skill that we have, it just takes practice. I go back to, what I mentioned before about what we do at home versus what we do at school. How quickly do we listen to a student in a school, yet cut off our child at the dinner table, right? We don't even let them finish out. They've said, after dinner, can we, and you already know they're asking for ice cream. So you've already decided that you're going to cut them off and say, no, we're not having ice cream tonight, but just listen to them for that minute. So I think that's a really important one. And the other one I would say is reflection. I think that's important. We don't learn from experience. We learn by reflecting on our experience. John Dewey said that. And I think, that just comes down to how do we learn from all of our different experiences and what we bring each day is something that happened the day before, the week before. So that, what did we learn from that? Because if we're not learning from that, we're going to keep making the same mistakes over and over. So I think that's something, again, talking to your teams about, talking to people about, when are you taking time to reflect on what you've experienced? Because that's ultimately what's going to make you a better leader, because you learn each of those times. So you're going to have similar experiences, not the same exact experiences. Josh, you mentioned the cheerleading mom, right? Or what's happening on Twitter, TikTok, the party over the weekend that spilled into something else that all of a sudden is now all over the hallways, the classroom. So it may have been something a little bit different last month, last year, but what did you learn from it? What mistakes did you make? Own those mistakes, and how can you do a better job now?
What about those beautiful airdrops in the middle of lunch? Oh, Lordy. Oh, Lordy. But we learn from that real quick, right? When we hear that, ooh, we know we got to deal right away. 4 hours of the rest of the day. You're done investigating. Hey, you know I'm talking to you there, administrator in South Dakota. You know what I'm talking about. So you know what, Bobby? One of the things that you address are different look for different topics in the book to address to become a better version of yourself.
Yep.
And the issue is that sometimes we're still horrible at it. We know we gotta fix this,
Yep.
yet we have not fine-tuned that practice. We know we're doing wrong by not doing it. And you know what? I'll fall on the sword. As you said, being a former Marine, I gotta get stuff done, and it's gotta go in this order, at this time, at this moment, and it's gotta be done the day before to be effective and efficient for the next person not to get splattered.
Yep.
And if you can't do it, then I jump in and do it for you because it's got to get done this way to ensure smooth transition of whatever the task is.
Yep.
And you know what? I know that's not effective. But you know what? If it's not getting done, in the end, Alpha and Omega, A through Z, it all ends in our chair,
Yes.
whether we want to or not. So if the clerk doesn't do it, if the cafeteria manager doesn't do it, if your lead teacher doesn't do it, and it gets lost, guess who always has to fix it? We do in our chair.
Yep.
That's a reality. But I'm still horrible at that. I'm great at delegation, leaving you alone. But if it's not getting done through timelines, I jump in.
Yep.
What is yours?
Mine is the time that you should spend between the stimulus and the response. There's that gap, right? Viktor Frankl said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and our freedom, right? And so, my father's Italian blood runs deep through my veins, which means that, you're supposed to react to something that happens, not take the pause, breathe, and respond, right? There's a difference between reacting and responding. And so I have to work at having that pause, finding that gap, like I said, after that stimulus comes in, and whether that's at home with my 3 children and my wife, whether that's in, the dining hall when something happens with a student or a teacher who comes in, you don't need to react immediately. I think sometimes we still think that the person that has the strongest reaction is the best leader and cares the most and is most, they have the most emotional investment, and that's sort of how we project out our leadership or our dominance in that situation, instead of recognizing that what needs to happen in that moment is an intentional and thoughtful response, right? This idea of recognizing that calm breeds calm and chaos breeds chaos. So how do I stop, take a breath, ask a clarifying question or two, and then look to that next step? And that is something I've been thinking about probably for, I don't know, the last 2 or 3 years since I read Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for Meaning. And, it's that idea has stuck with me. Think about everything that he went through in the Holocaust and all of his life lessons and experiences he shares. And again, like that's that gap for me, right? Between I know what I should do, but here's what I am doing. And so that's something that's really important to me that I just have to get better at.
Hey, hold on. Hey, Bobby, hold on. Hey, young man over there that's been a stranger. What's yours?
I was just going to comment and share a little bit. I think one of the biggest elements is related to, identifying what's best. What's best for me isn't necessarily best for others. And, much like Josh, while I don't have the Marine background, I like things done a certain way. I've got a certain level of trust in my team, and I really want to let go of control and remind everybody that while we know the job is XYZ, the tasks are A, B, and C. They don't necessarily to be done the way that I want them done.
Yeah.
So suspending judgment, withholding, the the Hawkeye, on the task management, and being happy that folks have the capacity to do the job that I do trust them to do. I talk that a lot, but I need to walk it better.
Yeah.
I need to suspend the judgment on how jobs A, B, and C get done for tasks X, Y, and Z, and just be gracious that folks are doing what they need to do, sometimes above and beyond, or sometimes in a very different way, or a less efficient way than I might see them being able to be done. And that's in the primarily in the office management area, in the classrooms. I really do trust, my teachers and members of the team to do what's right by kids and by them. But sometimes it's difficult to get outside of that tunnel. So
Yeah.
But as we sit down and think here, Bobby, you're very well read. You're very articulate. You've got the book. You've got your experience, 15 plus years as an administrator and coach, high school educator. What's next for you? What's next for the book? What are you hoping to have at your fingertips and take next steps with?
Sure. Thanks for sharing, first of all, Chris. And I think we're all guilty of that too, like you said, wanting things done a certain way. I'm obviously excited. The book's been out just over a month, and excited to see people are sharing their reviews on Amazon and what they've learned from the book. I do have my website, bobbypolicino.com, and have a bi-weekly newsletter that goes out about Principled Leader and some of the principles that you can implement in your role. So I'm hoping to get some more subscribers around that. And really, as going back to Josh's question earlier about sort of why now, I'm just hoping that the book helps people that are in leadership roles or are aspiring leaders. I want them to be able to be as successful as they can be. I've enjoyed getting to join podcasts like this one with you guys and share what I have, and just want to continue sharing my lessons and hope to learn more from other people by getting to talk with people like you, and just appreciate all of the opportunities that come with that, and just keep trying to grow and be a better husband, a better father, and a better school leader.
So let me ask you, what are the main themes found in the book? Just let them enjoy it. Like I like saying, I like to get dirty in a book, highlighting, making side notes, putting stars. That's my learning process. What are the major points for me as a reader? What am I gonna, when I dive in there, what am I gonna be looking generally at?
Sure. And for people like you, at the end of each chapter, there are a handful of questions and then some lines in there for you to jot down your answers to. So I'm glad that you were able to share that there, Josh. So really, the book is broken down into these different principles. So relationship principles, leadership principles. Chris mentioned earlier the fitness principles, and I break that down into mental, physical, and spiritual. And then also talk about decision making. And so really want people to look into these different areas and then see what the connections are. Josh, both of us talked about the cognitive dissonance around what we were saying at our school and how we were living our lives. If you think about, this idea around these relationship principles around, how do we listen at work? Well, that's going to also impact your relationships outside of work if you're really developing and growing as a listener. If you hold yourself to a certain standard consistently, your children see that, your spouse sees that, your parents, brother, sister, whomever you interact your most with, you're sharing that. People get to see that. And so really hoping that people see those connections. And that last part really also I want to get back to on the fitness level is the COVID hangover, as you referred to it, Josh. As things are shifting back, more and more educators have to recognize the importance of caring for themselves. I just last week I was in the classroom. I feel very fortunate. I still teach a class. It's called Leadership in Action. It's a 12-week course, and I talked to the students about personal development. And I talked about this, the mental, physical, and spiritual development and what that looks like. And we use the analogy on the airplane when they tell you to put your oxygen mask on first. And why is that? And the importance of being your best self every day. And so what exercise routine can you work in? Can you go for a walk for 5 minutes during the day, in the morning, at night? Is there something around there? Is there some sort of mindfulness that you can work in, whether it's journaling, whether it's meditation, whatever it may be? And then that spiritual piece, sometimes very quickly want to go to say, well, I don't really believe in a God, or I don't practice religion, or, can't talk about spiritual aspects at our school. It's that, well, spiritual can mean so many different things to different people. Where do you find yourself in this universe, right? Just sort of that. So it doesn't have to be praying. If that is a way that you find it, that's great, but it might not be. Everyone has their own approach. And I think that's so important. And both of you talk about that as well. Sometimes as leaders, we want to put our own approach on others. Well, this works for me, it should work for you. But I think as you go through that book, all of these different principles that you read about for building healthier relationships, for being a leader, for the fitness aspects, you read them and then find ways that are going to help you be the best version of yourself, so that you can be the best leader for your community. And I really think that's something people can take away from it.
That's
Sunday night.
outstanding.
Just real quick, Chris. Just it's Sunday night. We're about to head into Monday. Weather has been kind of cookie around the United States. Some people feel that lead blanket on top of their chest right now already. We have state assessments coming up. They're knocking on the door. What advice do you give educators out there to start off on Monday, having a marvelous Monday? What would you say?
Well, a friend of mine, Sean Galliard, on Twitter talks about Celebrate Monday. Sean throws that out a lot, and I love that. And I think it's, that's just such an important way to look at Monday, is that we all may have had a difficult weekend. We don't, depending on what's happening in our lives. For some of your students, seeing you on Monday is going to be the best thing that's happened to them in the last 48 hours. So never forget the impact you can have on somebody else with a smile and a greeting and saying their name, right? They say that to the human ear, nothing's sweeter than hearing your name said. And so just recognize you got into this profession for a reason. Know your why about, what it is that got you here and why you're here, and recognize the profound impact that you can have on someone else starting at 7:30, 8 o'clock on Monday morning. And use that as your guide and as your North Star to help drive you and motivate you to be your best self on Monday.
Centering back in on purpose and, the impact they have on others. Educators really have done this. We didn't get into it because we love numbers. I was a math teacher. I realized that I could share numbers in ways that folks could understand them. And
Right.
It happened to be middle school kids. That was my target. But teaching and educating is so much more than just content. It's about identifying that whole person and thinking about how we can not want to be identified as a champion of others, but how we can be a champion of others. And it can be academic, it can be social, it can be emotional. Like you said, the weekend may have been fantastic for some. It may have been wonderful, but others may have been in an absolute state of disarray, and the only normalcy is Monday morning, 7:30. The doors at Dudley Middle School open. I can go and get breakfast, and I'm going to be greeted by Star and Tuck and Straz and a few of my teachers as I walk down the hallway. I'm going to get high fives, and I'm going to go into homeroom, and I'm going to have some morning work to do. And my routine is set.
Yep.
And I have to look forward to this until Friday, and that will help get me through the next weekend of disarray and dysfunction. And sometimes we as educators lose sight of the idea that kids show up not only because they have to, but because they really want to. And honestly, they need to. So, when we sit down and talk about the impact and that power, it's something that sometimes gets lost. And, Monday mornings, the message that I send out I send out a daily memo each day, but the Monday one is usually ramped up about relationship and impact.
Yep.
How can we go ahead and influence others? How can we take some of their burden, put it on our shoulders, but at the same time feel fulfilled, in here with their burden? So, Bobby, as we've talked, I've gotten a number of notes from this evening, and others may be curious to read the book Principled Leadership and learn more. But going to the source is always a great thing. How can folks get in touch with you, make contacts, and even learn more from down in the Mid Atlantic?
Yeah, thank you, Chris. So you can go to my website, bobbypolicino.com. You can also find me on Twitter at Bobby Pollicino. And then I also, the book is available. It is on Amazon. If you just type in Principled Leader, Bobby Pollicino, you can get it right there on Amazon. And happy to connect with folks. And also, or through email as well, bobbypolicino@gmail.com. So, would love to connect with people, love to hear from them. I'm on LinkedIn too, because I think all of us are really in this together as school leaders, as educators, and for all of us, we can really do so much great with each other, and for each other. I think sometimes we worry that if we spread the word too much about others, there's not enough for us, but there's enough sunshine to go around for everybody. And the more that we collaborate and come together, the greater our impact will be.
All right, a great shout out. Hey, we just had the main man of the Fantastic Four, Principal Cafele, join us, and he will be watching the rebroadcast. Bobby, thank you very much for being here tonight. Don't forget, hey, you know what, Chris? We also have two other shows this coming Thursday. We have the Red Zone. The Educators Roundtable. Bobby was part of it, and you know what? We want to have you part of it. So if you're an educator, doesn't matter where in the United States, please reach out. We want to hear your voice. Iowa, Idaho, we haven't heard from you. It's crucial. So join us for the Red Zone coming up 9 p.m. Eastern, and we also have our Tuesday show, which is Office Hours, a 20-minute problem-solving show, which we also need educators from across the United States to come and join us. Thank you very much for being here tonight, Bobby. Take it away, my man. You got the Rolling Stones, or you don't have the Rolling Stones?
I don't have the music. We don't need music for this. Bobby was absolute fire, and I'm dancing in my head right now, Josh. Next Sunday is Super Bowl Sunday. Thursday night, we've got the Red Zone coming live. We're looking forward to the great participation. Thank you, Josh, for being on screen with me tonight. Bobby, it was great to meet you. It was fantastic to learn from you, and I look forward to reading that book cover to cover, as opposed to the excerpts that I was able to take a peek at. Everybody out there in Unlock the Middle Land, on behalf of Josh, Bobby, myself, Dean Packard, thank you. Have a great evening, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.